window to the front. Don't know what that means.
There you go. Something's coming. What I'm looking at right now is a browser window.
Browser window. All right, let me try this again. I'm just gonna do full desktop.
I see the Zoom browser window.
Okay.
Zoom. See Safari window that's empty.
Okay.
There we go. Mighty
All
Signal.
right. So yeah, I think something weird happened when I clicked present.
There we are. Now we're seeing it.
Now we're seeing it. Okay.
All good. All good. Kept me from having to make a little small talk, but we can make some small talk. Why don't you tell everybody where you're at right now, Ryan?
I am in basically a tough shed in my backyard. It's
very nice tough shed.
Yeah, it's like it's got power, it's got internet, it's got a Telecaster and a Peloton. So yeah, but it's kind of the it's the safe place. It's where I come for customer demos and X-Plenty webinars to avoid the wrath of my 3-year-old and 5-year-olds who are no longer in school or daycare right now. So they are kind of available to disrupt, but I have my wife fortunately blocking for me right now.
Great. Well, tell her thanks from all of us here at the X-Plenty webinar. And without further ado, I think let's just get started. It's Ryan Buckley from Mighty Signal. He's going to talk about exotic app data. I don't know where the exotic went, but we got to keep that in there. Exotic app data and Salesforce. And so thanks, Brian. Go ahead and take it away.
Okay, no, thank you. Very happy to be here and to chat about a couple of, well, I'll tell you exactly what we're going to cover. But yeah, we're going to cover alternative data, also known as exotic data. We'll discuss what it is, what different flavors there are to choose from. And if I can convince you that this is worth dipping your toes into, then you'll learn how to go about acquiring some of this alternative, AKA exotic data. And because mobile data is what Mighty Signal lives and breathes, or eats and breathes, whatever the term is, we'll go over that as kind of a case study. But at a very high level, alternative data is essentially the market for very niche, but miles deep data sets. And some of them, in fact, are very broad and also very deep. So the idea is that you seek out proxies for trends and things that you're interested in. So instead of pointing directly at, say, your target market, your target prospect, you find proxies. And once you've identified a proxy that kind of works, it's correlated, if not causal relationship with your target, then you can go after that data set and often get a leg up on your competitors who haven't figured out that there's that relationship. So it kind of comes in 2 steps. Like first, you're sort of boiling the ocean, you're fishing for correlations or causal relationships that are not obvious. And then once you have them figured out, then you go a mile deep and kind of use it to run your business. So what we've seen, people who do this in a sales and marketing context, faster call prep, better lead scoring, and certainly better than just using the same DNB or Zoom info data set that everyone else is using. So yeah, we can talk about what it is. Commonly referred to as exotic data, and like everyone in the beginning of quarantine, got caught up in the Tiger King series. So it kind of inspired this example, which would kind of work. And this type of data, believe it or not, does exist. So if you're selling a product to high net worth individuals, like let's just say you sell private jets or 100-year-old bottles of wine or caviar or something, instead of going on Twitter or caviar forum websites to try to get them directly, you might find that, hey, people who travel on private jets also tend to own large exotic animals. So you get that data set, and that leads you to the target that you're looking for. Hence the Joe Exotic reference here. The other term that is commonly used for alternative data or exotic data is alternative data. So using the example of political data, the now infamous alternative facts point that Kellyanne Conway, who was President Trump's press secretary in early 2017, made about like crowd size, et cetera. There's so much political data out there. There's so much social media data out there. You could essentially mine that. And if you had a hypothesis that your target customers would react in a certain way to this very specific story, you could go out and get the data set of every Twitter account that liked or retweeted some tweet mocking this particular episode or defending President Trump in this particular episode. The point is, politics aside, you use this and think of it just purely as data points. And you can be really creative with it. So exotic data, alternative data, they kind of mean the same thing. I've been largely giving these examples in sales and marketing contexts, but they're really more commonly used. These data sets are used by hedge funds looking at macro market trends and really just building models, plugging them in, trying to find any type of statistical relationship between weather events, sports events, consumer purchasing behavior, the amount of foot traffic in New York City, plugging any of that into a model to try to predict the swing in either overall market movements, like just tracking the S&P, or looking at specific large cap stocks. This is the kind of stuff that hedge funds would be using this for. And there are also some pretty obvious examples like shipping. Of course, there's tons and tons of shipping data going back decades. And for like your typical person graduating with a math degree from like Carnegie Mellon and going to a hedge fund, what they might be doing is, let's just go buy a data set of just like tracking the shipping containers all over the world, and understand that data set, plug it into maybe some model that they have where the dependent variable, the y in the equation, is percentage movement in S&P, and then all of the x's are essentially things like this: shipping data, weather data, the presence of news, various calamities, hurricanes, etc. You plug that into the model and try and use that to predict what's going to happen. So I don't think there are too many hedge fund people listening in. So you can also use this data for sales and marketing. And that's really what the focus of this presentation will be about. But the point that I'm trying to convey is there is literally every kind of deep data set under the sun that that you might need if you had a hypothesis to test. So of course, question comes up like, how do you get it, and how much does this kind of stuff cost? Battlefin is probably where, like, the #1 place where that undergrad working at a hedge fund would go to acquire a data set. They're based in New York City. They are basically known as the #1 marketplace for alternative data sets. They host a big conference every year. Of course, now it's gone virtual. I think they now do 2 per year. And they're kind of like virtual marketplace, like live marketplaces where you can virtually go to someone's booth, have a conversation about the particular data set that they own, and Battlefin will work with you to negotiate a transaction. They also have like more of a self-serve version for those companies that are willing to essentially give Battlefin a copy that you can then download. AWS Marketplace is the same way. There is AWS Marketplace is kind of the umbrella. There's a data market within AWS Marketplace. I just checked it out. Like, there's a whole bunch of COVID related data in there right now. You have Foursquare basically selling that foot traffic example in New York. You can go there and buy that from them. You can actually get the COVID testing and death like data set from the federal government through this marketplace. And generally, the benefit of going through one of these data providers, someone who's selling on Battlefin or selling on AWS, and I'll get to Kaggle in a second, is they've done the work of like massaging and cleaning this data for you. Even if you know where the source data is, like, you know where to go on the SEC website to download like all of these insider transactions or K1s or S1s or like whatever bit of financial data that you're interested in. It's really a pain to grab it. Even census information or weather data, which is available, often from like NASA or NOAA. You could go there yourself. You could download it. There might be multiple data sets that you need to stitch together because they're not just going to give you like a 10 gigabyte dump. You're going to have to download year by year, 10 megabytes each, and stitch it together using SQL or some other scripting. So the value that these companies have that kind of specialize in weather data or foot traffic data is they've done all of that dirty work for you. So you get a nice clean file that's just basically already been processed, and there's real value there. If you don't really want to pay for it, or you're curious about it but don't fully want to commit, Kaggle is known for 2 things. It hosts data, but it also hosts kind of a marketplace for data scientists and people who both want to market themselves as well as their scripts. And frequently you can get the raw data as well. And most, if not all of it, is free. So Kaggle is where you would go if you're like a data science PhD student and you're looking to collaborate, you're looking to get a couple consulting projects to pay for your living expenses. Kaggle is where you would go. And so there's also some very inexpensive data sets there as well, very searchable. So I've used mostly Kaggle, but frequently look at Battlefin and AWS. You can also, of course, go directly to companies that have the data, and Mighty Signal is one of them, and I'll get to that. So I've kind of given you an overview of what alternative data is, a bit about who uses it. Again, these are like niche data sets that either span a long period of time or just go a mile deep and cover every inch of territory. And so they're unique data sets in that sense. For example sake, I'll cover mobile data because that is what we know. It occurs to me I didn't really introduce myself or what Mighty Signal does. I guess I'll take a moment to do that now. So I am the CEO of Mighty Signal. we're the big data provider for the mobile internet. And I've been with Mighty Signal now for a couple of years. We run an API that gives you access to the Google Play Store, all of the apps, all of the publishers, all of the rankings, all of the ratings, like basically everything that you see when you load a page on your iPhone or your Android phone, and like you're looking at that page, deciding whether or not you want to download an app. We've pulled that information down, put it into a nice API or data feed, and give that to you. We also collect SDK information. Those are the software libraries that app developers install into apps. And SDK developers are some of the largest companies on the planet. Those are the logos that I'm showing here. If you build any kind of mobile app, you are bound to use an Amazon product, a Google product, or a Facebook product. And like, the Apple products kind of course, because Apple sort of owns the whole mobile supply chain. But you might be surprised to know that basically every app on the planet, whether it is Google or Apple, is using some kind of Amazon data store, analytic product. Like Amazon's everywhere on mobile, and it's deep into the mobile apps. Like it's core to the mobile app infrastructure. So why would you care about mobile data? Combined, these logos on here are several $1 trillion of market cap. There's a long tail after that, but also some very, very large software companies. If you were a hedge fund, say, and you were curious about what's going to be happening in the next 3 months or the next 6 months in tech stocks, you'd be pretty wise to be looking at, okay, how are Apple's and Google's downloads going? Like, how many installations do they have in the most popular, and say that the 200 most popular apps? Like, are there SDKs in there? Same thing with Facebook. Even if Facebook.com's traffic is declining and you have less people on there, you better believe they have tentacles also in deep into mobile apps. And they are kind of everywhere as well. They run one of the most popular mobile development frameworks. So you can get a lot of insights into what's happening in the mobile space by looking at, or just in the tech space in general, by looking at the mobile data specifically. So I would consider mobile data a proxy for just tech in general. And because things like the NASDAQ are so tech heavy, it can also be predictive or interesting for just the markets in general. And if you sell to any kind of technology companies, then understanding what's going on with their mobile apps and their mobile divisions would be, really important. So let's just say that you are selling into a technology company that has a presence in mobile. So what are you going to do? Assuming that your team is using Salesforce, that is, what this whole conference is about. That you value the data from Google Play Store. Like, you want to know downloads, you want to know how many ratings there are, what the sentiment of those ratings is. Same thing for the Apple App Store. You want to be able to combine this data, put it into Salesforce where your sales and marketing teams are living, and you don't want them clicking out to access this data. You kind of want it to live in Salesforce. So what are you going to do? The first thing would probably be to distill down what kind of data you want to be putting into Salesforce. Maybe you've isolated a few of those fields that you want to get in there. Maybe you use a tool like Xplenty to transform and push into Salesforce, or you could use Mighty Signal's native Salesforce connectivity, where we'll actually, through once you've given us the authentication we need, we'll actually create fields in your Salesforce instance. We'll create custom objects. We'll create an app object and an SDK object. We'll associate it with your accounts. And through that, we've essentially merged the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store into your Salesforce, all with native data, like native data to Salesforce. These are not like Apex pages sitting on accounts. Like these are actual, this is data that's sitting in your Salesforce instance. So you can run native reports. And just to further plug for a second, this is what our integration would look like. If you were selling to Zoom, then you could click this button on the Mighty Signal page for Zoom, or you can also see the types of technology that they have installed and uninstalled in their app. So you say, okay, that's interesting. Click that button. Now we've pushed all of this information into your Salesforce account for Zoom. We give you this information. So this is, you're looking at Salesforce Classic here, but essentially we've taken the Mighty Signal data, pushed it straight into Salesforce. Now your reps don't need to click out of Salesforce. It's all there. They can run reports. Everything is a native Salesforce object. And we push a ton of data into there. We're trying to essentially give you everything that you could possibly need in order to make the best decisions, streamline your sales process, et cetera. And there is a ton of mobile data available, every way to slice the ecosystem. It's there, you can buy it. So yeah, just taking a few examples, I wanted to end the presentation part of this before we get into Q&A with, I think, some pretty informative and like illustrative case studies of how this works. And again, whether you're interested in mobile data or not, whether you really care about Mighty Signal or not, these are, you can replace these elements with the type of data that you do care about. So the point of this is to share a pattern for how this could work. So we have one client that's using Looker to compute essentially a lead score. So they're using the Mighty Signal API to whenever someone fills out like a demo request on their website, that gets pushed into Looker. They're probably pulling firmographic information out of like Clearbit or ZoomInfo or something like that, maybe Discover.org. They're taking the bits of data that they care about and that they found are relevant through there. It's like your typical firmographic stuff, revenue, employees, et cetera. Then they're pulling from Mighty Signal, and we'll tell them how many SDKs they have in their mobile apps. We'll tell them how many mobile apps they have. Of course, the more mobile apps, maybe the more interesting that that prospect or that lead is, especially say if they're interested in ad inventory, then a prospect that has a whole bunch of mobile apps would be like, yes, we gotta put our best sales guy on that one. So they take that information, compute a lead score, and then based on that lead score, they push into Salesforce, and then they use Salesforce, to split up into territories and do the assignment to a particular sales rep for follow-up. And we also have our own direct integration into Salesforce. So they're taking our automated Mighty Signal data. Looker has its own connection in computing that lead score. And this all is kind of bidirectional, like every piece is pushing in and out of each other. And it's a really interesting, really robust way to do this. And not pictured here are like various like Slack notifications that are automated, and it's pretty cool like what they've been able to build with this. So having a BI tool is really the point of this slide. Here we had another customer who's using Pardot for marketing automation, and essentially using that to push data into Salesforce. They didn't want to use all of our fields. So they're very cautious and sensitive about the number of custom fields that are added to their Salesforce. They don't want to get it too bloated. So they really wanted to control what's going in. So they're using our API instead of our Salesforce integration, and having Pardot do some of the lead scoring and legwork. So lead comes in, goes to Pardot. Pardot will also be able to see any other page visits. And again, this comes down to lead scoring, that kind of stuff that Pardot does best, and newsletter opens and clicks and all of that. They're interacting with Mighty Signal to capture some of that same type of important mobile data that they care about. And then it's actually Pardot that is pushing into Salesforce, because now Pardot is owned by Salesforce. It can interact really cleanly with your leads and accounts. And so it's essentially enhancing itself with Mighty Signal data just prior to getting pushed into Salesforce. Also a pretty cool pattern, and very linear in that sense. And then the last example, more based around Xplenty, is taking data that is sitting in Redshift, mixing it with Mighty Signal data within Xplenty, and using that to transform it, choose which fields are getting enriched or edited, written into Salesforce, and then doing it that way. A really configurable approach, and that Amazon Redshift could really be replaced with any kind of external data store. If you don't want to deal with something like Looker, you don't want to pay the whatever it is, $50,000 a year for BI, but you do want to have external data stored, then if you have like big data somewhere, one of the Amazon database products would work. If you want to mix it with Mighty Signal, again, outside of something like a BI tool, then Xplenty is a great way to do it, and then use its Salesforce connection to enrich and push data in. So yeah, just another way to go about using alternative or exotic data, mashing it up with data that you already store from your own clients, data that you're collecting from third parties, transforming it, and then pushing it into where your team can actually interact with it and use it to make decisions. So yeah, last point here, and I think we have 10 or 15 minutes for Q&A if there are any questions out there, is that alternative data, exotic data, it's not something that every team is aware of or thinking about, but it's always competitive, especially now. It's hard to get attention from businesses that are intent on being as frugal as they can right now in the face of budget cuts and economic uncertainty. So one way to be as targeted as you can and kind of be clever and maybe outwit your competitors is to identify some correlation that that may not be obvious, and use that to your advantage, using an exotic data set. And then I discussed a few ways to actually incorporate that into your workflow and ultimately push it into Salesforce. So yeah, with that, I'm happy to take any questions there might be.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, if you have some questions, throw them in the Q&A. I was going to ask, you showed kind of a usage of Mighty Signal there where there was a button to export into Salesforce. Yeah. Now, was that so that's on the Mighty Signal side? You can do kind of filtering and things like that.
Yeah. So the idea there is we have a UI that a lot of our customers are using. That's probably our most popular by revenue. And so if you had someone from sales or marketing doing research, and in Mighty Signal, you can filter on apps that have moved up a certain number of rankings or are now at a particular ranking. You bring them up and you say, wow, this is actually a great prospect. They're not in our Salesforce right now. I want to push that account into Salesforce. You click that button and then we'll actually create the Salesforce account. If it actually already does exist, there's a little box, you can search for it and then attach it to an existing Salesforce account. So either way, we'll either create a new one or we'll use an existing, and then push all of that app data in, and then create the custom objects that are the apps and the custom objects that are the SDKs. Push that all into your Salesforce so that your team going forward can use it there, and it'll start to show up in your Salesforce reports.
So if you're using some other kind of integration, if you want to integrate to some other platform that isn't Salesforce, or if you want to do like the example you showed where Xplenty comes in there and pulls the data out and merges it with something else, can you mark fields in can you mark records in Mighty Signal for later export? Or are the people that are using your API just going to get everything and filter it on their side?
Yeah, so if you're not using our Salesforce integration, so we don't have write access to your Salesforce account, then yeah, you would use our API to pull that data, which is all accessible. The data and the UI is accessible through our API. And then, yeah, then you'd use an Xplenty or something to push into or write into Salesforce and do any like pre-computing that you want to have done.
Okay.
Yeah, we work with some pretty large companies that don't want to give us direct or programmatic Salesforce access. So that's kind of the workaround is if they have a tool that's already gone through all of their compliance and vetting, then have that tool use our API, and then we never get direct access to Salesforce. And security-wise, of course, that's the safest way to do it.
Sure. I've got an audience question here. How
Sure.
can I identify new exotic data sets that will combine well with my traditional data to give me new insights?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. There isn't really a secret sauce there. I'd recommend just getting familiar with those providers. Go to Battlefin, go to Kaggle, check out the AWS data market, and you will kind of have to search around. And they'll give you varying levels of samples or schema so that you know what you're getting. And it's just going to vary. There isn't a lot of standardization in the alternative data market. It's not quite like the wild, wild west, but it's certainly a bit more fluid than your typical B2B data set that you get from ZoomInfo or Discover.org, where that is very standardized and there are norms. But with this stuff, you just kind of have to click around.
Right. I did some research using data from the AWS marketplace. Google has a similar thing too, where there's openly available data sets that you can actually, some of them are already in a format where you can just load it into BigQuery. But just to use an AWS example, the two data sets that I looked at that I was using, you have to go in and research what the format is. You have to, it's work. It's not like, oh, let me just load this in. And some of them, there's volume issues too. You got a lot of data that you have to winnow through. So, but that's why there's an opportunity there. It's not something that's easy for the average person to do. So
yeah, no, it takes a commitment, and you're exactly right. That is essentially a barrier to entry, and that is why not everyone does this.
Right. Well, especially, I don't know of any other company that does anything similar to Mighty Signal. I didn't know that anybody did it before you and I had talked the first time. So I think there's probably also for other specialty data, there's probably little Mighty Signals around that are doing the same thing.
No, absolutely.
And not Kaggle, but the other one that I just went out of my brain, the one that has a fin in it. That's the one that's
Battlefin.
Battlefin. You think that's probably the best marketplace for that, or the more?
Yeah, they are kind of the most enterprise, the most mature. They've been doing this for a long time, and they sell to hedge funds. Like that really is their primary customer. So yeah, there's a certain expectation and sophistication of their marketplace where, yeah, they're committed to doing some of the homework and making sure that the data is good, and that you're going to get what you're expecting when you go through them.
And do they also prep the data so that's easier for you to load and use, or is it?
Exactly, yeah. So their self-serve product does that, but not all of their providers are comfortable having Battlefin host. So you're not going to get that through everybody, but for certain vendors that are comfortable with it, they'll at least put a sample up that that then Battlefin has essentially transformed, and it's in a standard format. So every time you go to Battlefin through their self-serve, it's in the same format. Yeah, so that's an easier way to go if you're lucky enough to find the perfect data set that's already in their standardized format.
Yeah, and from my experience buying data sets from vendors, a lot of times also too, they'll sell you a little chunk that's winnowed down to what you're interested in, and then you come back and they'll sell you that other chunk. Is that how Mighty Signal does it, or is it you get access and that's it?
Yeah, so it's kind of like you either can take a sip, or you get the whole fire hose.
Okay.
Yeah, so our trial is essentially that. It's just a snippet. We can customize it for you, but then once you've absorbed that and you liked it, then the only other option is to get the whole thing.
Somebody, it's not really a question, but a compliment in the audience. They just wanted to say all around, very insightful and clearly conveyed the art of the possible. I'm sure some people that it was too high level for, but having deep ad tech experience, this was right on point. So.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Feel good about yourself. There you go. All right. If that's the end of the questions, if no, do you have any last words?
No. So here's my
for this conference. Sorry.
No, yeah. Here's my information. Ryan@mightysignal.com. Would love to hear from anyone.
Great. Well, Ryan, thank you very much. It was an eye-opening presentation, and thanks for going last.
No, you got it.
And that ends the live portion of our X4 sessions. But all the participants will get an email about where they can watch the presentations that have been recorded in case you missed one or some. And I want to thank Ryan. I want to thank everybody who spoke at the conference, and I want to thank everybody who listened. And have a good evening.